the first thing that you've got to go back to is you've got to go back and fall in love with the vision. And the vision means, what does success look like for you?
Hello, and welcome to Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast. This podcast is dedicated to chiropractors who are in the seasons of launching and building their practice. Join myself, Dr. Lona, and my co-host, Dr. Bobby, as we have conversations each week as it relates to building the practice of your dreams. And remember, you can have a remarkable practice as part of a remarkable life, not instead of one. We're here to lead you on the way.
Welcome back, team, to the Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast, where we show you how to build your remarkable practice as part of a remarkable life and not instead of one. So we're super excited to be back with you guys. Dr. Lona, what's going on, lady? How's your weekend?
My weekend's been great. The boys and I played a lot of Legos.
Woo, Lego. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. How about you, Bobby?
I had a fantastic weekend. In fact, I was adjusting away, and then Saturday I just had to lay low, take it easy. You can probably hear a little bit in my voice. So let my body heal, do its thing. You know, sometimes I think we all get caught of just pushing a little bit too far, but I think it's important to recognize when your body's telling you need a break. So my weekend was spent having a break, staying with the family, staying with my little girl, and just having an awesome time. And now I'm bounced back, ready to rock and roll for a massive week. So super excited for this. So I'll tell you what, you and I know we were chatting about this earlier, and I know we've been chatting about this for a while. And today, guys, we want to talk about something that is very, very important to understand. I would say that this is one of the most important messages that I regularly remind myself of. And I always talk to people about this that reach out to me for help in not just chiropractic, but in any industry, right? And it was interesting, Dr. Lona, when we were talking about this earlier on, I know you were like, yeah, so true, right? We all hear it and we're like, yep, that's so true. Yet sometimes we fail to remind ourselves of that. And that is this. One of the things that we know is that success leaves clues, right? And there's a roadmap to success. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So many times in practice, doesn't matter what season we're in, whether we're in launch, we're trying to figure things out, or maybe we're in scale and we're trying to add multiple associates, we're trying to add the next location, we're trying to move to an enterprise. Or maybe you're trying to add another business. And the reality is that we try and reinvent the wheel. We try and kind of like be innovative. And don't get me wrong, innovation is awesome. You want to be innovative. It's not about not being innovative, but it's also about, first of all, looking back and understanding that, hey, success leaves clues. And this was a big thing for me. I know one of the things I used to think about in my head is I was like, okay, if you look at cars, you know, when I was a youngster, I loved cars, right? Dr. Lona, you love cars?
I like my car.
I was always a car guy, right? I love my cars when I was a youngster. And I used to look at them and they'd come in all different shapes and sizes. So you'd have like sports cars, you'd have like SUVs, you'd have like pickup trucks, you'd have all these different variations of cars. Then you'd have different brands of cars, you'd have different colors of cars, you'd have different luxury levels of cars. And we all know like the level of how much you can pay for a car can vary from like, I think my first car paid like $3,000 for it. And then you can get cars that cost you well in excess of 7 figures, right? And even though there's all these different variations, one of the things that I remember thinking about early on was like, one thing that stays the same amongst all these cars, regardless of like how much they cost you, one thing that always stays the same is that the wheels are always round on a car, right? And it's like, I'm talking to my friend about this once when I was a youngster, and he's like, of course they're round, doofus. Well, they're going to make square wheels. It's going to like make the car go super badly and super slow. And I was like, yeah, no, sure, I get that, right? But that's a typical example of like, doesn't matter how you change the car, one thing you cannot change is the roundness of the wheels. And I know that in different seasons of practice, it's exactly the same thing. Dr. Lona, what's been your experience of this? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I love your analogy there. As you were saying that, I was thinking, I heard the story, where they talked about you see a really nice car pull up or whatever that vehicle is that you're like, oh, wow, I wish I had that. And many times people would be like, maybe judging the person who's driving that or making up stories in their head. And really the question you should be asking is like, how did that person become the person that got the opportunity? And that's really what we're talking about is like, how do you look at people who've walked before you now? If they bought a nice car, how did they get to the place where they can buy a nice car, right? Or if they have the practice you dream of, how did they follow the steps that got them there? Because they were probably taught things because other people have come before them. So yeah, I get what you're putting down, Bobby.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. So today, guys, we're going to talk about lessons from the trenches. What were the biggest lessons learned through navigating the different seasons of launch into build, through scale, and through exit? So we've had the great pleasure to work with people in all different seasons, from people that are just starting off. In fact, people that haven't even started, they're going to start in like 8 months' time, 10 months' time, 12 months' time. So I'm launching in 12 months' time. Dr. Bobby, Dr. Lona, we need help with this. All the way to people who have multiple locations. We have people that we work with now that will have 50 locations, 60. I think the most off the top of my head is 87 locations. So it's like, how do you go from, oh, I'm just starting off and I have these challenges how to build a practice, to like I'm scaling 87 locations. And so I can tell you through each one of those seasons, having visibility into all those offices and everyone in between, guys, to the person that's exited and the person that's exited for 7 figures or multiple 7 figures, there's lessons learned. So why don't we go through lessons learned of the trenches through our own personal experiences? Dr. Lon, I'm going to pass this over to you. I know you were asking me questions about, Dr. Bobby, all the biggest lessons that you will learn. And I was like, this is going to make an awesome episode. Let's talk about this. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to you. I'm an open book. What do you want to know about lessons learned from me and my experience in chiropractic?
Awesome. Well, before we even get into your lessons, let's just hear kind of like the first 2 to 4 minute version of your journey up until this point, because we know you as the guy with the best voice in TRP and chiropractic, and probably not from the US. But if you haven't listened to us before, who are you, and how did you get to this point where now you're teaching so many other chiropractors?
All right, I love it. So I guess the way that I look at it is, in the beginning, in my family now, let me start off by saying this. In my family now, we have 6 chiropractors and a seventh one studying. So we're definitely really heavily ingrained in the chiropractic culture in our family and our lifestyle. But I was chiropractor number one in that family journey. In fact, my wife is going to argue with me there. Technically, we graduated together, the both of us. So we're equal one. All right. We split it as we were both number one. Now, when I graduated, quite frankly, I graduated from a school that was great from a technique point of view, was great from teaching us how to be efficient, was great from teaching us how to be safe, was great from teaching us how to adjust. But ultimately, all the other stuff that after you've been in practice for a while, is important, we really didn't get any lessons on. So we had no lessons on patient care, patient management. I was taught that, a day one is basically when you meet the person for the first time. I had no idea that a thing like a day two or report of findings existed when I graduated. Our lessons on scheduling and care plans was, well, you kind of like make up a care plan. It might be, a common care plan that you might hear is 3 times a week for 4 weeks, and you'll do a reevaluation. And we had one lesson on that. I remember it was in our last 6 months of class. And I was like, okay, so what's the schedule of care that we give to people then? When is it twice a week? Or do we do 5 times a week ever, right? Okay, but let's just stay safe and go with 3 times a week, right? So when I graduated, I think it was safe to say that looking back at myself, man, I had no clue what I was doing. And those first 12 months were a struggle. The first 12 months, I had this goal where I was working in a supermarket when I was studying for like 5 or 6 years. And I had this goal where I was like, I want to drop that supermarket job within like a month of being out as a chiropractor. 12 months later, I'm looking back and I'm still in this supermarket trying to supplement my income. And I was really struggling. Specifically, Lona, I was having difficulty. I started from zero. So I started as an associate with no patient handover. So I really started at the bottom with zero and no skills, no knowledge about practice building at all. But I got this piece of advice early on that I think was the worst piece of advice that I ever had. And it was from this podiatrist who said, Dr. Bobby, you know how you build an amazing practice? And I was like, no, what's that, Lance? And he goes, basically, you just sit around, kill time, watch movies, just kill some time. Okay, don't stress about it. And after enough time, enough people would have heard about you where they'll tell other people and friends, and you'll just like organically build a practice like that. So don't stress too much in these first like 3, 4 years. Like it's going to be slow. Just enjoy that time and fill it up with movies and things that actually you enjoy. And that kind of gave me the validation of like, oh, great, I can just watch movies and do nothing. But after about half a day of doing that, I was like, no, I've got to be doing something, right? If anyone knows me, it's like, we've got to rock and roll. So I was trying to figure out how to get new patients in. I had no clue. And I like to say, if somebody held a gun to my head and said, you have to get 5 newies in by the end of tomorrow, I wouldn't know how to do it. I'd be like, I don't know. I've got no clue. And so this struggle continued for the first 12 months. I was like really kind of unsure what I want to do. I had this vision kind of where I was like, oh, I want to just 100 people a week, right? But to be honest, I had no clue how to do a day one or a day two. So I was like the old dog chasing a car that if they ever caught the car, they wouldn't know what to do with it. So when people would come in just organically through my principle for a day one or a day two, I kind of wouldn't really know what to do. I'd be reading my school notes, right? We study here chiropractic in Australia through university. I was reading my uni or my college notes about, day one, what questions should you ask in a history? And so for me, that struggle was real. And I got to the end of 12 months and the most that I ever saw in a week was in the last week of my first year of practice. And that was 50 visits on the dot. I remember I cracked 50 visits on the dot. And while I was like stoked with that, at the same time, I was like, oh man, this is horrible. So that first year was difficult. And then something happened where
I just want to
the
like
switch.
point out something you said because I think there's a lot of people that sort of maybe hide. They don't like have a tribe around them and they may totally resonate with what you just said there. Like they're working a second job to try and just make ends meet to possibly build a practice. And so that's such a, I think, important thing to underline that sometimes when you're in this phase, like your back is really up against a wall. And you've been there too, Bobby. And I know like we all have stories of where that's like a defining moment when you're like, do I just like shut down into my little shell or do I know that there's a better way to get this done? And obviously you chose the latter.
Yeah, and I did what I had to do, right? I remember like that job, and I'll be completely open book here. I was earning $300 a week from that supermarket job. As a chiropractor, I was earning $300 a week as well. And I was like, no, I can't leave that job until I'm earning $1,000 a week. And I would on weekends go and work in the supermarket. And luckily I was in the bakery section, so I could kind of hide because I was always worried about would practice members see me? Would they be shopping, right? And it was far enough from where I was practicing, about maybe 20 miles or about 30 kilometers where I was practicing, where I only ever saw one person from the office, right? And I quickly just hid, right? So they wouldn't see me. What are you doing working in the supermarket, right? But I did what I had to do. And to be honest, it got to a point where in my associateship, great, then I was making enough income to sustain myself, which was great. When I then went and had the idea of, which is the next part of my journey, I want to start my own office. Okay. For me, it happened, I started to get itchy feet literally about 6 months in. My personality type, if anyone knows profile scans, is high extroversion, high dominance, low patience, low conformity, which means let's gut and grow, baby. Let's build practices. So 6 months in, I was like, I want to go back to the vision that I had when I was at school, which is open my own practice. So I found a place, I found a location. That first year when I bought my own practice, it was a struggle, right? I bought a tiny practice. We saw 17 visits on the first week that I was there. I took over practice that which we bought. But what happened now is, I had skin in the game. I had, and I'm going to be complete open book in this whole story. I had $40,000 sitting in my account, and this office was $45,000. So I got a loan from the bank, and I was like, okay, I've got $40,000, but guess what? Now I've got a bank loan. For the first time in my life, it felt real. I was like, wow, I've got a loan. This thing's now like that loan is ticking every single month. So when I took over my own practice, there was an extra added now motivation to like, all right, let's figure this out. And, I was putting in so much effort. I think that first year, the amount of hours that I did was insane. Um, Halfway through that year, I was like, all right, like I'm going to burn out doing this. Like, this is insane. But I almost felt like I was this big Ferrari engine, but I was just wheel spinning a lot in the spot, right? I wasn't really kind of putting massive runs on the board. Sure, we got from 17 visits to about 50 visits and 70 visits and 80. And at the end of that first year, my first practice, that we took over, I got to about 90, mid 90 visits, 95 visits within 12 months. But I felt like things were going to connect soon. Like they were kind of like working together. And then that's when really transformed for me. Like what happened after that was absolutely insane. That was roughly around the time that I actually heard about Dr. Stephen Franson on a podcast, funnily enough. And he was talking about this idea about there's predictability in building practices. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Okay. You need to learn the wheel and then you need to make it your style. Put your personality into it, put your spin on it, put your core values on it. Every practice is different, which is what's beautiful, but there's key fundamentals that you don't want to change. And I was like, that is spot on the mark. So I started working with him instantly. I heard that on the podcast literally. And that day I was like messaging him. And next thing you know, I'm on a call with him like 2 days later. And I started working with Dr. Franson. That probably would have been about 2013. And what happened to us over the next 18 months, I just describe it nowadays as like nothing short of insane, crazy. Everything just started to click together. And our practice grew by roughly about 650 to 700 visits a week in the space of the next 18 months. My team started to expand. So I got CA number 1, CA number 2, office manager number 1. Then we've got new business development manager, marketing manager, right? And when we're expanding, we weren't expanding with a low fee. It wasn't Dr. Lona like, oh, we're doing $20 adjustments. It was like, no, at that stage, this is now 10 years ago, we were at a CVA, so a collection visit average of roughly about $60. So $6 average collection visit average, and we were just gunning and growing. Then first associate started, which was my wife. Obviously, we were business partners, but at the time we were still dating. Second associate started, third associate started. We went on a journey where we outgrew that first space, moved into a second space. Actively the second one, move into a third one. Actively the third one, move into the fourth one. And I'll never forget those days where, I'd be in a space. It was literally about 800 square foot. For those people who look at square meters, it was 67 square meters. And we were seeing about 750 visits, 750 visits a week in 67 square meters. And it was just insane. Like at the time, it was like crazy. But I look back at it now and I go, man, that was some of the funnest time. People were out in the corridors waiting, stacked up. Like it was the best. So that was
That's
my journey. And then since then, it's just been adding associates, adding locations. And then the natural forte after that was, teaching other people. And I've always been the kind of guy that's like, hey, Lona, guess what? We did this thing. It's absolutely insane. Here, just take it, copy it, use this ad like this. Here's the follow-up sequence. Here's the phone call. I was never the kind of person that was like, oh no, there's a limited amount of success I'm not sharing with you. I was always the kind of person that was like, just take everything you need, apply it exactly the same and watch it. This is crazy.
That's awesome. And I know you're a wealth of knowledge because what you just explained there, if you think about the changes that someone has to go through in order to do something like you just explained there in that amount of time, let alone any time, is just like jaw dropping. So that's amazing, Bobby. So with that said, I know like there's probably been many, like probably hundreds of schools of hard knocks and challenges you went through in that process. But if you kind of look back on like some of the like, let's just pick a couple, two, three of your biggest challenges and how they transformed that growth pattern for you, like what would you say those were?
All right. So for me, this is always the biggest thing you've got to figure out. It doesn't matter where you're stuck. If you're just listening to this right now and you're launching your office, or maybe you're listening to this and you've got 3 locations, 2 of them are a headache, one is working okay, and you're not really sure what to do next, right? The first thing that you've got to go back to is you've got to go back and fall in love with the vision. And the vision means, what does success look like for you? So what are you trying to achieve? And I say you need to have crystal clear clarity about your 12-month vision story. If you're hazy about, I kind of want this, like I was hazy, I want to get to 100 visits a week. Why? Oh, because, it'll be good to see more people. Okay, why would it be good to see more people? Oh, well, because maybe I can help more, maybe I can make more income. All right, why is that more important? Like the more that you went deeper with me, the more hazy that I would get. And then if you start to go to, well, how are you going to do that? I'd be like, oh, I don't know. So for me, the biggest thing that Lona always and always will be, whenever you're at a point where you're either stuck, plateauing, or you're growing fantastically and you want to continue to grow and you want to continue to scale, it's vision. Go back and really get honest with yourself and ask yourself the question, do I have crystal clear clarity about what I'm trying to achieve 12 months from now? And if the answer to that is no, you need to get present, you need to find some time, you need to find some focus, you need to pray, meditate, right? Whatever you need to do, whatever you believe in, but you need to get present with yourself regularly and you need to ask yourself those questions and the answers will come to you. But it won't happen by chance. You've got to carve out the time to actually get clear with what's your vision story for success. So whenever I'm stuck, most of the time it's a vision thing.
Yeah, agree. All right, what else? What else you got there?
So I think after you're clear with vision, right? It got to a point where I was like, yep, I know what I want to achieve and I know why. That was one of the first things that Dr. France and I worked on in our calls together. The next thing that became very evident for me is I had no clue about systems. So I learned pretty quickly there's 4 primary gears in practice. There's 4 things that you've got to master, depending on what level you're on to what level you have to master it on is impacted. So those 4 systems are attraction, conversion, retention, and team building. You need to know how to get new patients to the office, and that number is going to change. So it's going to change depending on how many people you're trying to feed. So in the beginning, it was just me. So I was trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I get 20, 30 new patients consistently to my office every single week, right? Then it was me and my wife, right? Then it was 3 associates, 4 associates, 5 associates. And we literally went from, you put a gun to my head and say, get 5 new ears in tomorrow. I wouldn't have a clue what I'm doing. To then months where we're getting 147 new ears in per month. So you can imagine if you're getting 147 UEs in a month and your systems are set up properly, okay, you freaking explode. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned through marketing is this, I can tell you right now. I used to think marketing was, this like sleazy thing, like, how do I market? Well, what do I do? Okay. Instead, what I learned is that marketing is actually, when you've got an amazing product like what we do in chiropractic, marketing is actually an act of kindness. And it's your duty to learn systems and process and procedure to get the message out. And here's what I learned. You ready, Lona? When you actually know how to articulate our message in its just purest form, it's freaking sexy and people love it. Okay. Every single person, if you ask them, is the body intelligent? Is the body designed to be healthy? Is the body smart or silly? Everyone's going to give you the same answers. It's smart. It's intelligent. Yes, it's designed to be healthy. If you cut yourself, you heal. You just need to know how to put that together in an articulate way, and then be able to put that through systems that you learn and take it to the market. And so when I learned to do that, yeah, we went from, having onesies, twosies, or 0 new patients per week to 147 new patients a month, adding tech CAs,
That's awesome.
CAs, associates, and then just exploded on the back of that, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and you make it sound so simple, but I know a lot of it becoming that simple was a lot of hard work and figuring out what you weren't doing right, I'm
It's
sure.
far side simplicity, right? So far side simplicity means like when you figure something, like it takes work, okay? E equals MC squared, far side simplicity. Like when I learned that in physics, I was like, easy equation, E equals MC squared. This is going to be the easiest thing in the test to figure out. You just take M, right? And you times it by the speed of light and you get the answer for energy. However, the amount of thought and brain power, understanding and dedication that had to go into figuring out that formula is insane. So E equals MC squared is far side simplicity, right? Whereas near side simplicity is 1 plus 1 equals 2. So practice success is far side simplicity. It's like you need to put the energy, effort, and guidance. But when you do it, the rewards are absolutely amazing. And it gets to a certain point, regardless of where you're listening in from, it gets to a certain point where it becomes bigger than you, and it needs to become bigger than you in order to continue to scale to the next level.
So good. So good. Okay, so I want to hear what you're going to say for your third one because I'm sure actually we should probably do like 10 episodes on this, but if you want to illustrate anything else for us before we wrap this
We've
podcast
got
up?
time in the future. People have questions, right? Because I know when you hear that and you kind of go, wow, 700 visits, 147 new ears. Guys, on this podcast, we are all ears and we're a complete open book. If you want to know exactly what that is, no problems. Let us know. Reach out, ask questions. I'm more than happy. I'll give you our marketing plans. I'll take you through exactly like what the marketing plans look like. So we can have totally in the future more episodes on this. But lesson number 3. Okay, so lesson number 3 that I learned through this journey is the importance of having a mentor and being plugged into a tribe. Because even in that period that we grew an insane amount, okay, now in hindsight, in retrospect, 18 months feels like a short period of time. But 18 months in the moment is not a short period of time. If you're like absorbing every moment, 18 months, like try and hold your breath for 18 months. It's going to feel like a very long time, right? So in that moment, there was roller coaster of emotions. And what I recognized is that in the early days when I was struggling, the roller coaster of emotions was mainly down. Most of my days were down, 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 down. Every now and again, up day, right? And then down, 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 and then up day. Whereas when I started to regularly be held accountable, be trained knowing that I was being trained in the right areas. I wasn't just being trained in topics that sound good and will feel good, because there was plenty of, jacuzzi experiences where in the moment it sounds cool what this person's saying, but give you the practical steps.
Mm.
That first year when I struggled in practice, I was still getting coached by another organization. And again, my question that made me leave that organization was, if somebody asked me, do you know how to get 5 new patients by tomorrow? Would you give me that answer? You've invested $20,000 in coaching. Do you know the answer to that question? My answer was still no, I don't know. So I recognized that I actually needed the practical tools, not just the sound good ideas. And so very quickly, what I realized is when I had a mentor, someone who was teaching me the systems properly, and then introducing huge levels of accountability, then being plugged into a tribe, because a lot of the time, the way that you learn is, yes, by absorbing information. Do you know how you accelerate your rate of learning, Lona?
How?
By sharing and teaching other people.
Oh, so
So
true.
I would get to events, or I'd be plugged into a mastermind call, or I'll speak to other docs, and slowly there'd be more and more people reaching out, right? And then I'd be like, I would say to them, hey, guess what, right? So, I did this conversion process. So he said, we're doing care plans, conversion process, automatic direct debit payments. Okay. Hey, we've got this wellness club set up now, which is where people get to this point, they're in wellness care, they move into the wellness club, and there's these features and benefits and really cool advantages of being in the wellness club. And then every month we're just adding people to the wellness club. Here's how you do it. Here's the benefits of the wellness club. Here's how you set it up, right? But when you share that with other people, it actually gets you to do it even at a higher level. And when you do it in a structured way and you introduce accountability, I love what Dr. Francis says about this when he says, if you want to get better at something, if you want to develop a skill set around something, the way that you do that is step number 1, training. You've got to have focused training where somebody who's done that and is doing it trains you, right? Then if you actually then want to take that skill set and apply it and get good outcomes, okay, there's a process to that as well. Because there's a lot of people that have great skill sets at things, but then they don't really apply it. I know so many people when I was growing up and I used to play soccer, right? Or football as a youngster. There were so many people around me that were so talented. They never made it anywhere because they didn't apply that skill set and that talent. So the way to apply the skill set is step number two, which is accountability. And you've got to introduce rhythmic accountability, right? Which happens on a rhythmic basis. And that's a formula for applying skill sets. So for me, that was huge. And I got that out of, standing on the shoulders of giants and being plugged into a group. And then what I realized is that before it would be down day, up day. For me, then it turned into down day, up day, down day, up day. And then it would be update, 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 down day, update, update, medium day. And then I learned how to regulate and navigate my emotions and realize down day is not a down day. It's actually lessons learned.
Mm.
And then from me, then it was like, okay, on fire, on fire, on fire. Ooh, great lessons learned today. Great lessons learned yesterday. Great
Yes.
lessons learned. Did a dinner workshop, only had 10 signups this time. And I had an expectation if I did a dinner, I should have 40 sign up from the last one, right? So rather than down day, it was like lessons learned. Guys, let's deconstruct this. What happened at this dinner that ended up giving us that outcome of 10 rather than 40? And that was the biggest game changer, being plugged into a tribe because we're on the journey together then.
Love that. That was good. All right, I'm gonna hit you with one last question here. So when you because you already kind of illustrated that there was a transformation within you that was, instead of looking at it like this is bad or why me or why is this happening, it was like, ooh, what can I learn here? Why is this happening for me? Like, what do you think was the catalyst? Was it the coaching and the tribe that helped you change, or like if you were offering that internal piece to someone, where they look within, like any pointers there?
Yeah. I believe if you look at the experience of COVID taught us many things. One of the things that it taught us is that as human beings, one of the primary things that we need is connection to other human beings. In fact, the very thing they took away from us is connection to other human beings, okay, to control us. So I believe that connection to other human beings is the key to the answer to to the majority of this, because connection to people that have already been on the journey. So whatever struggle you're facing right now, it doesn't matter where you are, what struggle you're facing. Here's one thing I can guarantee you. Somebody has already faced that struggle and successfully navigated through it, right? We're super blessed. I know Lona, Dr. Lona, both you and myself in the Rifle practice, we're super blessed because we have people in the tribe, like I said, that are all the way from like, I'm going to launch in like 12 months time, all the way through, I've got 87 plus locations, to the people who are exiting for more than 7 figures. So there's people that have done that successfully. So my biggest lesson, my biggest takeaway is don't reinvent the wheel, right? There's no need to do that. Instead, understand the wheel needs to be round. But then once you understand and learn that, you design the car however you want to design it.
So many good nuggets there. I think we could go on your learns for several podcast episodes. But in the show notes, I know there's a way to connect with Bobby if something he said, like you're like, I do want to know what you did for marketing to grow that fast. Definitely reach out. Bobby, any last thoughts here?
Yeah, look, I would say that one of the primary reasons that we don't grow as a profession is because of isolation of chiropractors. I really truly believe that in my heart that, even if you look at sporting stars, how many sporting stars after their career go through emotional battles and depression and suicide because their whole life they're being in a team environment, they're being, good energy. There's a lot that goes into that. And there's a lot that goes into the management. And I've had visibility into that with people in my life on a really high level that they perform at. And then they get unplugged from that, right? And they suddenly don't have a tribe. They suddenly don't have people around them, right? So I look at in chiropractic as well, that exact same thing exists. We're in school, we're great, we have camaraderie, and then we kind of leave. And unless we put energy into that, then entropy takes over, things fall apart. Next thing we find ourselves where we're just in our office, head down, bum up, we're trying to figure it out, or we don't really have a tribe around us that are on the same mission. So yeah, biggest thing is get plugged in, guys. Find your wolf pack and you'll never look back. Doesn't matter what season you're in. You could be 58 years old, smashing it in practice. But at that point now, we're like, well, is this what it's like? Do I just do this forever now? Like, what does the legacy look like? What does the next step look like? Do I want to, edify associates now and teach them and build them up, right? Believe me, the answer is plug into a tribe. And I'll show you someone who's 72, okay, that's like loving it, that has this person I'm thinking about, I think has about 18 or 20 associates, okay, multiple locations, 72, running a chiropractic enterprise. It's like, when you meet this person, you're like, it's back on, baby, let's do it. So get plugged in, Doc, one big takeaway for me.
So good. Thanks, Bobby.
Love it. Thank you, Dr. Lona. I'm looking forward to part 2 of this, where we're going to reverse the roles here. We're going to be interviewing Dr. Lona about her lessons learned.
I'll see you at that one.
Let's see you soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Build Your Remarkable Practice podcast. Remember, what the world needs now is chiropractic, and what chiropractic needs now is more successful chiropractors. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, share with your friends, and leave us a review. And if you'd like to connect with us personally, please click the links in the show notes to schedule a call.